Okay, welcome to this week's Parsha, a very unusual setting. I have the privilege of being at a chuppah. I'm in between the chuppah and the dinner in a very, very beautiful setting in a country English hotel estate. And I'm sitting in a pod in the glorious gardens here. I've got a window to record the shiur and sharing with you some very beautiful ideas on Parsha's Beha'aloscha. So if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com and I'll send you the handout. The first idea is from the very opening of the Sedra. The Pasuk says, when you light the menorah el mul pnei ha-menorah ya'ir shivas haneros, vaya'as kein Aaron. And Aaron did exactly as he was told, and he lit the menorah. Says Rashi very famously, lahagid shvacha shel Aaron, he to the praise of Aaron HaKohen, sheloi shino. He didn't deviate from what he was told. Famous Rashi on the opening of Psukim of our Sedra. The question, of course, is, he's Aaron HaKohen. Of course he's going to do what he's told. He was given a commandment by Kodesh Baruch Hu to light the menorah. What would we expect? Why would he deviate anyway? What is the praise of Aaron HaKohen? Shelo Shina. Well-known question. Let me share with you something I came across in the writings of someone called Rabbi Eli Sheller. He says a fabulous story. There was a flag boy in Russia. His job was to stand along the route of the trains and to wave the lantern if he needed to stop the train if there was some sort of emergency. Sadly, one night he messed up and there was a terrible train accident, and not before too long they realized the boy has been guilty of something. He didn't do what he was meant to do, and he was hauled in front of the court. The Russian judge doesn't take any prisoners, and he's standing in the dock, and he said to him, "You're accused of a very serious crime." He says, "Let me question you. Were you at your point last Monday at 10 p.m? The young boy said, "Yes, I was, Your Honor." He said, "Did you have a lantern with you?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you wave the lantern?" "Yes, I did, Your Honor." The judge says, "Okay, case dismissed. You were at your point, you waved the lantern, there was nothing else you could do." At which point the prosecuting lawyer jumped up and said, "Your Honor, you forgot to ask the main question." "What's the main question?" "The main question is, was the lantern lit? Inside the glass jar, was there a fire? If there's no fire, you can wave the lantern as much as you want, but the train driver is not going to see it." And that, perhaps, is the point. What does that mean? Take a look at the Sfas Emes in the second box. Vayas kein Aaron shelo shino. Aaron did it, he didn't change. Yesh lefarish ki asa ma'aseh mitzvah kol mechayev bekavana v'rotz nechod. His enthusiasm didn't wane. He was doing it with the same passion and fire as he always did it. Think of the proverbial mitzvah boy. It's a great example because you talk to kids who are 14, 15, 16 years old, they remember very well the first time they put on tefillin. It was so exciting. The smell of the tefillin, the excitement, doing it. But now, a year, 2, 3 years and longer for others, for the rest of us, are we doing tefillin with the same excitement? And that's true with all mitzvahs. The challenge is to maintain the initial enthusiasm. Says the Sfas Emes, ki derech kol adam, that's life. In the outset, when we first do something, we're full of enthusiasm. But then it slides away. And we need to find ways to maintain that enthusiasm. And the reality is, the first time around when we do things, it's full of excitement. But the chiddush is, and therefore the chiddush of Aaron HaKohen is that he came with new ideas and new excitement and motivation that always kept things fresh. That is the praise of Aaron HaKohen. He came along with new hasagas, new ideas to maintain the freshness and excitement of lighting the menorah. Really, that's the point. When the flag boy in Russia, he can wave a flag. We can go through the motions. We can put on tefillin, but if it's lacking the fire, if it's lacking the motivation, the enthusiasm, then chaser, then it's missing so much. The point is that we just going through the motions without the chiyus is bad news. The Maggid of Mezrich used to say, "Lo omus ki echye v'asapeh maseko." What does that mean? Lo omus ki echye. I shouldn't die, but I want to live. Well, if everyone's got to die at some point, Loi omus means Loi omus whilst I'm still alive. Ki echye, whilst I'm alive, I want to be really alive. I want there to be a fire in the lantern burning strong. That's why the Rabbi says often in Nach, it says Ka'es Chaya. Ka'es Chaya. What does that mean? The Rabbi says that there is an expression Ka'es Chaya as this time lives, because there is a time which is living time and there is a time which is dead time. We want there to be a chiyus in everything we do. And that's really the praise of Aaron HaKohen. Now, let's move on. Second idea, Pesach Sheni. The Pasuk says, "Vayimru hanoshim ha'imo elov anachnu tzmeim lenefesh." It's a very interesting episode in this week's Parsha, where you have people a year on after they came out of Pesach. We're going to celebrate Pesach again, and there are people who were tomei. They couldn't do it, and they wanted very much to keep Pesach and to bring the korban, but they were tomei. They were onus. And they come to Moshe Rabbeinu and they say, "Lama nigara, why should we lose out? We want desperately to offer up the korban Pesach." And they're given a second chance. The second chance is called Pesach Sheni, and that features in Perek Tes of this week's Perek Tes in Bamidbar in this week's Sedra. I came across a lovely idea in Rabbi Rosner's Sefer, quoting someone called the Eitzrus HaTorah, Rabbi Elio Chaim Cohen. And he says something very, very interesting. Let's go through it together. When it says Vayomer Hanoshim Mohema, the Sifri says, they were good people who were motivated to keep the mitzvahs. They were sort of trembling to keep all the mitzvahs. They were anxious and excited to keep the word of Hashem. Says the Eitzrus HaChaim, Lebiu ha'inyan yesh lahakt in Divrei Gemara. Let me explain by way of another Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachas Lamed Look at the difference between the early generations and the later generations. The early generations, they would bring their fruit through a gate. Because the halacha is you only have to bring maisa once it's at the final stage of the process. You sort of brought it home through the main gate. Doros Achronim, however, they would bring their fruit into the house, but not through the main entrance, but through the roofs, their chatzeros or the courtyards, their chafifios or other ways, because that way they would be exempt from maisa on a technicality. That's the halacha with tevel. You're only going to be chayiv for maisa when you bring it through pnei habayis, the main entranceway of the house. An amazing thing. What's the Gemara saying? Look at the difference between early generations and later generations. The real test of a person's avos Hashem is what happens if for whatever reason you couldn't do a mitzvah. Doros ha'achronim, the later generations, they were very makbid not to eat tevel, which means produce which had not had trumas and ma'asos taken from it. They would make sure that they were eating only kosher. However, if they would have been on the same level as the earlier generations, they wouldn't have found excuses or strategies to evade the mitzvah. Because those who love Hashem, they don't want to be exempted from doing mitzvahs. They're trying to find ways to be mechayev in mitzvahs. Next paragraph. That explains the people who said to Moshe Rabbeinu, why should we lose out? That's what the Sifri means. They were kasherim and charedim on the mitzvahs. They were good people who were diligent to do the mitzvahs. And because the Avos Hashem was burning inside their hearts. On the contrary, to find ways where they'll be obligated to do mitzvahs. They want to do mitzvahs. That's what the Gemara means in brachas. Look at the difference between the early generations and the later generations. Listen to this. The Gemara says in Sukkah that there'll be a time, la'asid lava, in the future, where the non-Jewish world will come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, we were wrong. We should have said Na'aseh v'nishma. Give us another chance. Okay, mitzvah kali yesh li v'sukkah shma. I've got a mitzvah which I can give you. It's called Sukkah. Go and do it. Everyone will go out and build a sukkah on their roof. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make it very hot. The sun will beat down. And everyone, they can't cope. It's so boiling hot in the sukkah. They'll go out of their sukkah. They'll kick their sukkah and go. The Gemara goes on to ask, they're allowed to leave the sukkah. Why? Because since the sun is beating down on them, they're potter from the sukkah. Because they're honest and honest Rachmana Patra, and they're potter from this mitzvah sukkah. Mitzvah potter min sukkah. And the Gemara answers, to P'turi, true, they're potter, but bi'utzim mi ba'ati, why are they kicking the sukkah? Yehudi v'goy yetz min sukkah. explains the Otzach Chochma. A Jew and a non-Jew leave the sukkah. Lishneim oisa siba, mitzvah potem in the sukkah. Both of them have got the same excuse. They're mitzvah, they're exempt from the sukkah. But look how different is their reaction. You can see from their reaction of how they leave the sukkah, they're miles apart. The guy would come out, he'll turn around and say, look, I'm exempt from the sukkah. I'm exempt. He's got an opportunity to throw off the yoke of mitzvahs. I'm now exempt. However, but the Jew, he's regretful. He's disappointed. He couldn't fulfill the mitzvah. He comes out subdued, sad that he hasn't got the opportunity to pour a kos for his Rebbe. Sort of throws it back at him because it's beating down. The sun is beating down. Chavivas HaMitzvah continues the next paragraph. Etzel Gedol Yisrael, the cherishedness, the love for mitzvahs for our Gedolim is so evident. Mesupa al Hagon, he tells a crazy story with the Vilna Gaon. The one time the Vilna Gaon was put into prison, and on Sukkos, and the Vilna Gaon, he knew that the halacha is that shena outside of a sukkah, chutz the sukkah is asa, even shenas arai. So the Vilna Gaon did whatever he could to run around. He kept himself awake for as many hours as he could, for days, in order that he wouldn't be over the mitzvah of Shena Chutz the Sukkah. Because he has a Chavivas HaMitzvahs, he only wants to do the right thing, he wants to do the Ras Hashem. He then tells in this story, an amazing story, an old Talmud Chacham recalls in his younger years he learnt in Radin. And one time it was a Leil Shishi, Thursday night, he stayed up very late at night to learning in the Beis HaMedrash, and about 2 or 3 in the morning he came home. And he came back and he happened to be dorming in the house of the sister of the Chovetz Chaim. He was learning in Radin. And he comes home at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's walking the streets, it's freezing cold, the snow and the ice of Radin of Eastern Europe. And he comes out and he sees this figure in the distance walking, and he gets very scared. Maybe he should go back to the Beis HaMedrash. There's a stranger walking in the streets at 3 o'clock in the morning, who knows what he can do. And he gets closer, he's going to go back to his home and sleep a few hours before Shacharis. And he sees that figure is none other than the Chovetz Chaim. And the Chovetz Chaim sees him, he says, why are you up so late, young man? You should quickly go to bed because you're going to miss Shacharis tomorrow. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Quickly go home and sleep and make sure you're not late for Shacharis. Fine, he goes home and he sleeps. Sometime later, he speaks to his hostess and says, by the way, the strangest thing happened. When I came back from Leil Shishi, from Mishma, on Thursday night, I bumped into the Chovetz Chaim. He was walking the streets at 3 in the morning. What was he doing walking the streets at 3 in the morning? Says the sister of the Chovetz Chaim to this young man, he said, do you know he's been doing this for the last 3 nights? He's been looking for a Levana to say Kiddush Levana. He's so desperate to say the bracha of Birch of Kiddush Levana. That's because someone has a Chavivas HaMitzvah of doing the Ratzon Hashem. And that really is the point. The doing mitzvahs or not doing mitzvahs is a good litmus test to Ahavas Hashem. When you're part of a mitzvah, do you feel regret, do you feel sadness, or do you feel that I'm exempt, Baruch Shep Torani, life moves on? And therefore that's really the point of Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni shows the tremendous Chavivas HaMitzvahs of those people. I'm Tomei, I'm honest, but Loma Nigora, please HaKadosh Baruch, give me another chance. It shows the tremendous Madrega of Ahavas Hashem. Let me finish with one fabulous idea. At the end of the Sedra, as we mentioned in the Halacha, Miriam and Aaron speak about Moshe Rabbeinu al Oidus Isha Kushis Asher Lokach, and they get Soras. And the Pasuk says the most amazing things about Moshe Rabbeinu. Lo kein avdi Moshe b'chol beis nemanhu pel daber boy umadua lo yereisim ledaber ba'avdi Moshe. Why weren't you scared to speak about my Eved Moshe Rabbeinu? Let me tell you an unbelievable story. I don't think I've shared it here in the Parsha share, but it's a story which appears in the Moshe biography, and then they put on another one recently for his 25th anniversary, many years ago, and it's an amazing story. Moshe Feinstein died, of course, in New York. And the Levaya took place there, and then they flew the mace to Eretz Yisrael, and it turned out to be on Purim. It was Purim in Yerushalayim, it was Shushan Purim, and it was being celebrated in Yerushalayim, and it was a massive Levaya, hundreds of thousands of people, and that took place until he was buried in Har HaMenuchos on that day. Soon afterwards, the man who attended the Levaya started getting excruciating headaches, and he couldn't understand what it was. He went to the doctors, they couldn't find any issues. And he went to one of the Gedolim, and the Gedolim said to him, listen, talk me through your last few days. And he said, he was talking through, and he mentioned they went to Moshe's Levaya. He said, tell me, did you say anything perhaps against Rabbi Moshe? Maybe that could be the cause of your headaches. He couldn't understand, he didn't say anything negative. Anyway, he says, you know what, let's do a Gorel Hagra. The Gadol did a Gorel Hagra, a special way of opening a certain type of chumash, certain ways, until you come on a pasuk, which according to the tradition of the Gra is, there will be Megale, give you direction. They opened the pasuk, and guess what pasuk it came to? The pasuk in this week's Edra. Madua lo yereisim nadabe ba'avdi Moshe. You must have said something against Moshe Feinstein, that's what the pasuk's telling you. The guy said, you know what I did? I said to my friend, isn't it a shame? Hundreds of thousands of people of their Purim have been spoiled because of the Levaya, as great as Rav Moshe was. That seemed to be a little bit of a slur on Rav Moshe, that he's spoiling people's Purim. He said, take 10, the Gadol said to this person, take 10 people, go straight to the cave of Rav Moshe and ask Mechila. He did that, he recovered. That is the alluded to in this week's Edra. Why weren't you fearful to speak about my Eved, Moshe Rabbeinu? So there you have it. 3 very interesting ideas. The first idea, motions with emotions. That how come Vayas Kain Aaron lahagid shvacha shel shina? What does that mean? Because if you shake a lantern and there's no fire inside, it's empty, it's futile. That's what the Maggid of Mezrich says. That we've got to live. But our life should be full of chiyus, should have excitement. There should be a burning fire inside to make sure that we're doing motions with emotions. Then you have that very beautiful idea of second chances, Pesach Sheni, Satura. It's a good indicator of where our level of Avas Hashem is, and explains the Gemara in Brachos the difference between Doros Achronim and Doros Rishonim. Doros Rishonim, they wanted to be Kaim mitzvahs. They brought their food, the produce, through the main gate in order that they would be chayiv. But the Doros Achronos, they were finding ways in which to get out of mitzvahs. That shows a lack in Avas Hashem, and that explains the Gemara in Sukkah, the difference between the Jewish person and the non-Jewish person. That's because that's the difference in response, that I'm exempt from a mitzvah, is very telling on a person's madrega. And then, lastly, that story of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moshe Feinstein. Of course, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu in telling Miriam and Aaron that, but applies even in our times with Moshe Feinstein. Thank you very much for listening.